The air in Minneapolis doesn't just get cold, it gets aggressive.
Yeah.
It possesses a physical hostility. We are talking about 20 degrees below 0 Celsius.
4 below Fahrenheit for our listener.
And that is the kind of cold that carries a physical weight. It actually hurts to breathe.
It does.
It freezes the moisture inside your nose the absolute instant you inhale.
Yeah.
It turns the asphalt into something that feels less like a road and more like a sheet of iron.
It creates a physical limit on human patience. You know, everything just snaps easier when the world is frozen. Metal snaps, plastic snaps.
And people snap.
And people snap.
Exactly. On this particular Saturday morning, the city is already encased in this ice. But if you were there, if you looked at the footage or read the accounts from the people on the ground, the tension in the air was heavier than the temperature.
Palpable.
You could feel it. It was palpable. The city was vibrating with a very specific high-frequency anxiety. It wasn't just the weather. It's the atmosphere of a place that feels well occupied.
Occupied is the right word. But I want to pause the narrative right there, just for a second.
Okay.
Because if we get lost in the atmosphere or the mood, we might miss the mechanics of what actually happened.
You think we'll miss the facts?
You might miss the clockwork, the sequence.
You want to cut to the chase?
I want to be precise. We aren't here to tell a sad story about a cold day. We are here to analyze a collapse. A structural, a systemic, and a very, very rapid collapse of order. What we are looking at today is not a chaotic accident. It wasn't a fog of war tragedy where everyone was confused and things just went wrong.
You're saying it was calculated.
I'm saying it was a sequence of distinct, analyzable actions that took a citizen, a taxpayer, a medical professional, and turned him into a casualty.
How long?
In a window of exactly 10 seconds.
10 seconds.
10 seconds. From standing to dead. That is our data point. That is the entire premise of this deep dive.
So this isn't a standard news report.
We aren't just reciting headlines today. No, this is an execution analysis.
Okay. That is a heavy claim, a very heavy claim. But looking at the sources we have, looking at what sociologists might call the master script of the event, the gravity is undeniable.
It is.
Our mission today is to forensically reconstruct the death of Alex Pretti, and we aren't stopping there. We have to look at what happened immediately after, because the death was just the detonator.
The explosion was the siege of the Home2 Suites.
It's dark journalism today. We need to warn you, the listener. We're going to look at the breakdown of civil rights, the physics of a bullet, and the mutilation of a federal agent.
Yes, we are. We are going to walk through the blood and the snow.
So before we get to those critical 10 seconds, the window where everything went wrong, we have to understand the powder keg.
Yep.
Why was Minneapolis feeling like occupied territory that morning? Why was the fuse already so short?
You cannot understand the pretty instant without understanding the timeline. You just can't. Context is everything here. We have to rewind 2 weeks.
The death of Renee Nicole Good.
Precisely. 2 weeks prior to this Saturday, Renee Nicole Good was killed. And the circumstances are, well, they're hauntingly similar to what we're about to discuss.
This wasn't local crime.
No, she wasn't killed by a local street crime. She wasn't killed in a domestic dispute. She was killed by a federal officer.
And the justification given then, what was the official story?
Like self-defense.
Self-defense.
The officer claimed fear for their life. Now, whether that was true or false in her specific case is almost secondary to the sociological impact it had on the city.
Because it sets a precedent. It creates a narrative.
It sets a baseline of trauma. It creates a pattern recognition in the civilian population. So the community hears self-defense from a federal agent, and they don't hear a legal justification.
No.
They hear an excuse for impunity. They hear, we can kill you, and we will say we were scared, and that will be the end of it.
So the trust is already gone. It's not just damaged, it's shattered.
It is non-existent. The community is in a state of deep, active distrust. They aren't looking at federal agents as protectors. They are looking at them as potential threats. That is the psychological landscape when we wake up on that freezing Saturday.
And yet the agents are there. They are out in force. Why? What was the mission? Because usually when we think of local policing, we think of the beat cop, you know, the familiar face. But these weren't beat cops.
No, not at all. Technically, it was what's called a Title VIII operation.
Can you unpack that? What does a Title VIII operation actually look like on the ground for someone who doesn't know the term?
Well, it's an enforcement operation derived from the U.S. Code, specifically the section regarding aliens and nationality.
So this is immigration enforcement.
It is. We had agents from IC Immigration and Customs Enforcement and also the Border Patrol.
Now, some people might be confused. Minneapolis is a northern city. It's not on the southern border.
Right, but Border Patrol jurisdiction is a 100-mile zone from any border, which covers a huge amount of the country's population. But the key thing is, they weren't there for crowd control, at least not initially. They were there on a manhunt.
They had a target, a specific person.
Yes, a specific target, a subject named Jose Huerta Chuma. The intelligence indicated he had a criminal record, and they were there to apprehend him.
Okay, so from the federal perspective, what does this mission look like to them?
From the federal perspective, this is a righteous mission. This is law and order functioning exactly as intended. They are going into a city to extract someone they view as a danger to the public.
They're the good guys.
They see themselves as the good guys coming to arrest, and I'm quoting the sentiment often used in these briefings, the worst of the worst.
But that's not how the residents saw it. Not even close.
Not at all. And this is where that occupied territory feeling you mentioned comes from. When you have unmarked cars, masked agents, heavy weaponry, plate carriers, and a history of shootings like Renee Nicole Goods. The residents don't see a legal, ethical mission.
They see an invasion.
They see a violent occupation of their streets, a foreign force.
And this is where the friction starts.
Yeah.
You have these two completely separate, incompatible realities colliding in the same physical space.
Exactly. The federal reality, we are doing a necessary job, and the resident reality, you are hunting us.
And that collision point is where we find Alex Pretti.
Yes.
Let's talk about him. Who was he? Because in the chaos of the news cycle, he often just becomes the victim or the gunman. Depending on which channel you watch, we need to strip away the labels and look at the man.
We do. Alex Pretti was 37 years old, and if you look at his profile, he breaks the narrative the federal agents might want to spin.
How so?
He wasn't a career criminal. He wasn't a radical agitator out there looking for a fight. He was an ICU nurse.
He worked at a veterans hospital.
Just think about that profile for a second. An ICU nurse. That means he is trained to save lives, not take them.
Right.
It means he works in high-stress environments every single day. He deals with veterans, so he understands trauma, he understands service. He is, by any standard definition, a pillar of the community.
So you have a man who is professionally trained to remain calm when people are dying.
Yeah.
A man whose entire instinct is the preservation of life.
Exactly. And on this morning, he's out there on the street. He's a citizen observing this operation in his neighborhood.
And he encounters it. Now, we need to move to the forensic reconstruction of the shooting. We have to slow this down. We have the video evidence. We have the timestamps. We need to go frame by frame.
We do. And it starts with a catalyst. It's important to note. It wasn't Pretti who initiated the physical altercation.
The sources mention a woman.
A female protester, yes. The footage shows a Border Patrol agent violently pushing her. It's not a nudge, it's a shove. It's a physical aggression against a civilian. Now, put yourself in Pretti's shoes. You're a nurse. You're trained to be a protector. You see a woman being shoved by a masked man with a gun. What do?
And Pretti reacts.
He reacts, but not with a weapon, not initially. He reacts with his body.
How?
He interposes himself. He literally steps between the agent and the woman.
That's a protective instinct. That's the nurse coming out. That's the citizen saying, hey, stop.
But to the agents, in that moment, that is an obstruction. That is a threat. They are in what you could call manhunt mode. Anyone who steps in their way is an enemy combatant in that moment.
And this is where the escalation goes vertical.
It doesn't ramp up slowly. It spikes instantly.
Describe the takedown for us. What does the video show?
It's a swarm. We are talking about at least 6 officers. At least. They are masked. They don't look like your local police officers who you might know by name or see at the coffee shop. They look like military operators.
And they use pepper spray.
Immediately. It's the first response. Sensory overload. They blind him, they choke him, and they take him to the ground.
And the witnesses.
Witness is on the scene, and we have to give weight to what the people standing right there saw with their own eyes. They didn't describe an arrest.
What did they describe it as?
They described a beating. They described a clubbing. The words they used were brutal.
So you have a man, Alex Pretti, blinded by chemicals, his airways constricted, on the ground, surrounded by 6 masked men who were physically striking him.
Correct. And this brings us to the absolute crux of the analysis, the core of this entire incident, the open carry debate. Because this is where the narrative splits into 2 completely incompatible realities.
Minnesota is an open carry state.
That is a critical legal fact that changes everything. It is not illegal to walk down the street in Minnesota with a firearm holstered if you have the permit.
And Pretti had a permit.
Yes, the record is clear on that. He possessed a valid carry permit. His possession of a firearm was, by itself, 100% legal. He was following the law. He had jumped through the hoops. He was a legal gun owner exercising a right.
So he's on the ground. He's being, as witnesses say, beaten. He's armed, legally. What does the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, say happened next? What is their official justification for what comes next?
Their official narrative is simple, and it is designed to exonerate. They claim Pretti was armed with a 9mm pistol. That part is true.
Yeah.
But they claim he reacted violently. They claim that during the struggle, he posed an imminent threat to the agents.
That's the key phrase, isn't it? Imminent threat.
It's everything. Based on that claim, they say they were forced to use defensive fire.
Defensive fire.
That's the phrase. They fired because they had to. Because if they didn't, he would have killed them. That is their story. They paint a picture of a desperate struggle for a gun. A life or death moment for the agents.
But we have the video, and this is where we have to get really forensic, because the video acts as a counter-testimony. It speaks for the dead.
It does. The video directly disputes the imminent threat claim. Let's look at second 4 of the 10-second window.
Second 4. Okay.
Yeah.
What do we see at that exact moment?
At that specific timestamp, we see a posture that completely contradicts the idea of an attack. We see indications that Pretti was on his knees.
On his knees.
And we see hands moving toward the head.
That is a surrendering posture. That's universal.
It is the universal sign of submission. Hands up, hands on head. It signals, I am done, I am complying, I am not a threat. It's what you're trained to do when you're being arrested.
And the gun. This is the most important part. Where was the gun in that moment?
This is the most damning piece of analysis from the forensic reconstruction. There are frames, and analysts have pointed this out, that suggest the gun was not in Pretti's hand when the shot was fired.
Wait, unpack that. You're saying he didn't have the gun? He wasn't holding it?
The analysis indicates that an agent had already snatched the gun from Pretti's holster. The disarmament had already occurred.
So the imminent threat of the 9mm pistol was neutralized. It was gone.
The weapon was secured by federal agents. Pretti was unarmed. He was on his knees. He was blinded by pepper spray. And he was surrounded by 6 men. And then they shot him.
Well,
in the back. Let that sink in.
Shot in the back while on his knees. After being disarmed by a squad of 6 agents.
That is what the video evidence suggests. That is what the witnesses screamed. So when you compare the DHS statement of defensive fire against an imminent threat against the visual of a disarmed man being executed, the delta between those two things is where the rage comes from.
It's not just a gap in the story. It's a chasm. It's a black hole. It fundamentally changes the nature of the event from a shootout or a struggle to an execution.
That is why we called this episode Anatomy of a Collapse. Because in those 10 seconds, the entire social contract collapsed on that icy street. The idea that if you follow the law, if you get the permit, if you were a good citizen, you were safe, that idea died on the pavement with Alex Pretti.
And the city knew it. The people watching knew it in their bones. And that brings us to the climax. Because the incident didn't end on that street corner. The violence didn't stop.
No, the body was moved, but the rage migrated. It moved to the Home2 Suites hotel.
This is where the federal agents were staying, their base of operations.
It became the fortress. And the atmosphere shifted from a street protest to a full-blown siege.
We need to paint this picture for the listener. It's night now. The temperature has dropped even further. It is a dystopian cold, the kind that feels alien.
And you have over 1,000 protesters, maybe more. They aren't going home. They are surrounding this hotel, and they are furious.
The sensory details from the sources are just incredible here. The sound of police lights reflecting off the ice, it's almost a visual sound. That silent, frantic blue and red strobing against the white snow.
It creates a disorienting, hallucinogenic effect. And the sound, it's the sound of a mob that has lost all faith in the law. It's a primal roar that just hangs in the frozen air.
And inside the perimeter, what's happening with the agents?
Inside, you have the federal agents, and this is where we have to be objective. We have to report the violence on both sides. Because the narrative of the peaceful protest doesn't fully hold up here either. It turned into a brawl.
You're talking about the incident of the finger.
Yes. We have a report from Commander Marcus Charles. It's in the official record. And it details a specific, gruesome act of brutality against an agent.
What happened?
A group described in the report as violent agitators tackled an ICE special agent. This wasn't a push or a shove. This was a full-speed tackle taking him to the ground.
Okay.
And in the scrum, in the pileup on the frozen ground, an agent had a part of their finger bitten off.
Bitten off.
Bitten clean off. Permanently mutilated.
That's feral.
It is primal. It shows the level of dehumanization that was happening on both sides. The crowd saw the agents as monsters. The agents saw the crowd as animals. When you have people biting fingers off in the snow, you are not in a civil society anymore.
You're in anarchy.
And that's exactly how the federal command described it. Anarchy.
And how do you respond to anarchy?
With overwhelming force.
Special response teams.
They deployed the SRTs.
Yep.
These are the heavy hitters, the tactical teams, and then came the flashbangs.
Imagine that sound in the dead silence of a 20-degree night where every sound is amplified.
Sound travels differently in the cold. The air is denser. It's sharper. The concussions of those flashbang grenades would have felt like they were cracking the air itself. It would have shaken your chest from a block away.
Explosions in the freezing dark, a hotel under siege, a man dead in the street, a federal agent's finger bitten off. It feels like a war zone.
It was a war zone. It was a battle for authority, a battle over a simple question. Who runs Minneapolis? Is it the people? Is it the local government? Or is it the federal agents in masks?
And that question, who is in charge, takes us to the fallout. Because the political fracture was immediate and it was severe. This didn't stay a local Minneapolis story for long.
It broke right down the lines of jurisdiction. It revealed a massive crack in the American system between state and federal power that's always there, but you don't always see it.
Let's start with the governor, Tim Walz. He didn't mince words, did he?
No. He issued what essentially amounts to a public ultimatum. He framed it as a binary choice for the people of his state and the country.
What was the choice he presented?
He asked, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's close, he asked, do you want to be on the side of a godlike federal government that kills with impunity? Or do you want to be on the side of a dead nurse?
That is an incredibly powerful framing. Godlike.
It's a specific choice of words. It's inflammatory. It challenges the very sovereignty of the federal state. He's saying they are acting above the law, above humanity. He is stripping them of their legitimacy in the eyes of his citizens.
And the police chief, Brian O'Hara. He's the one stuck in the middle of all this. He has to work with these feds, but he also has to answer to the people of his city.
O'Hara's assessment was chilling in its pragmatism. He called the situation unsustainable. That's a logistical assessment. But he went further.
What did he say?
He pointed out the lack of regard for human life shown by the feds. When the police chief, the top law enforcement officer in the city, is saying that the federal agents have no regard for human life, you know the system is fundamentally broken.
It's the local police versus the federal police.
Yeah.
A civil war within law enforcement.
Exactly. But it went higher than that. Much higher. It went to Washington.
Representative Ilhan Omar, whose district this is in.
She called it state-sanctioned violence. She didn't call it an accident. She didn't call it a mistake. She called it violence that is approved, stamped, and funded by the state. That is a heavy, heavy accusation coming from a sitting congresswoman.
And speaking of funding, that's where Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer enters the chat.
This is the financial hammer. This is the moment where the incident transcends a local shooting and becomes a genuine constitutional crisis.
Schumer threatened the money.
He didn't just threaten. He moved to block votes, specifically the votes to fund the Department of Homeland Security, the parent agency of ICE and Border Patrol.
He held the entire DHS hostage, effectively.
He used the only lever that really truly matters in Washington, the budget. He made the Pretti incident a direct liability for the existence of the agency's day-to-day operations. He essentially said, you cannot act like this and expect us to pay for it.
So let's zoom out. Let's look at the whole picture now. We have the master script narrative, as you called it. We have two stories playing out simultaneously in parallel universes.
Story A, the official story. A split-second, necessary defense against a violent mob and an armed man. A tragedy, yes, but a necessary one to protect agents from being killed or maimed like their colleague whose finger was bitten off. A story of law and order holding the line against anarchy.
And story B.
Story B, the forensic story. The execution of a legal gun owner who was surrendering on his knees with his hands on his head. A man who followed all the rules and died for it at the hands of a federal squad. A story of tyranny.
And that conflict, that inability to reconcile those two stories. That's why Minneapolis burned that night.
Because both sides believed they were fighting for their survival. The agents believed they were fighting for their lives against a feral mob. The citizens believed they were fighting for their lives against a tyrannical federal force.
It leaves us with so much to process, so much to try and understand. But there's one thing that keeps coming back to me. One question that haunts this entire analysis.
Go on.
We are told to follow the law.
Yeah.
We are told to be good citizens. We are told in states like Minnesota that we can get our permits and exercise our rights.
Alex Pretti did all of that.
He did. He checked every single box of a law-abiding citizen.
So here's the question we need to leave you with. It's a question about the fundamental nature of our rights and where they end.
Ask it.
If a citizen follows the law, obtains a permit, carries openly, as is their right, and intervenes to protect a neighbor, does the Constitution still apply when the agents wear masks? Or does the mask cancel the Constitution?
Sure.
Think about that, because the answer to that question determines whether we are citizens or just subjects waiting for permission. We'll see you in the next deep dive.
Stay safe.